Hello.
How are you doing?
Hi,
Hey everyone. Slava
I'm fine.
Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Yeah, I'm happy we're back after several days, and I'm happy that technically speaking we're all fine, I think. Um, yeah, so usually we do a quick intro in the beginning, and then when we jump right through to introducing our featured Ukrainian. Yeah, but wanted just to first ask how everyone's been doing. How's everyone and your loved ones, especially?
I can start. I'm
Please, yeah.
fine, but as any Ukrainian, I guess, who are living abroad, I'm trying to manage studying, working, important things here. But as it could be, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been crazy weekend as well, especially in Europe. I mean, we're definitely gonna talk today about it, but I just had no idea that amid all of this, amid all of the genocide, someone will come up with such brilliant ideas as banning Ukrainian flags and public display of Ukrainian flags in any circumstances. This is just entirely bizarre, but also 100% proves the point why there is a genocide in Ukraine these days. What about you, Valeria?
I think a lot of us were like super anxious around 9th of May, and everyone was like, AK, like, yeah, Victory Day or whatever we want to call it. But I think now that it's what date is it? I don't even know. But anyway, it just I think it's not like nothing happened, because things continue to happen every day, but I feel like we were all expecting an escalation of some sort, and as far as I'm aware, it didn't happen to the degree that many of us thought it would. So I'm kind of feeling a little bit more, I wouldn't say relaxed, because none of us are relaxed, but kind of, yeah, hopeful potentially that this will end soon and not escalate continuously.
Yeah, but on the other hand, today's 77th day, and when I saw this number today, with each day, it just doesn't mean anything anymore. It feels like a very long one day that's just one end. So,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, maybe Val, do you want to kick in and especially to tell everyone else about the spaces for those who joined for the first time,
Yeah.
and then we can jump right in.
My doorbell just rang, so I'm just running up to my laptop to see exactly our description, but I'm going
No,
to try and improvise today. So,
no, I can do it for you. I mean,
you
that's
sure?
why there are two people doing that, because you never know. Okay, guys. So first of all, this is a live event that is being recorded, and then the recording will turn to be a podcast that we upload to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We started this event almost already 2 months ago together with Val, because we saw so many Ukrainians with perfect English sharing their stories across all social media platforms. Yet the conversations about Ukraine were and are still dominated by Western, mostly white and mostly male folks, and not only continuously robs Ukrainians of their agency, but it also perpetuates outdated, misleading, and false narratives about Ukraine and Ukrainians. So we want to foster a relaxed, safe, and chill space for Ukrainian voices to express themselves without the need of fitting Western boxes, and the rest can use the space to educate themselves and maybe decolonize some of your views of Ukrainians and Ukraine. So each time we spend most of the hour offering the space to a featured Ukrainian. And also don't forget that you can listen the recording as a podcast later. We've also launched our Patreon page where you can become a sponsor of Ukrainian spaces, because this is 100% a volunteer effort so far, and we really need your help and solidarity to keep going. And that's it. Shall I,
Yeah.
did I forget anything?
No, I think that's perfect. I think just to note to everyone who's listening, who's here right now, and who'll listen when this is a podcast. As you said, we now have a lot of supporters on Patreon, and we hope to soon get some help. So thank you to everyone so much for supporting us. But if you haven't yet, just check out the links on Maksym and mine page to see how else you can support the efforts that we're doing, because it's 100% volunteer effort by the two of us. As Maksym says every podcast, but I'll do it today since you've just read also the description of what we're doing here. Our main ground rule is that we let every single Ukrainian introduce themselves the way that they want to, the way that they see fit, and the way that they want our audiences to know them. So please, Nata, if you don't mind introducing yourself and sort of the way we ask as well is sort of, your life before the full scale invasion, and has it changed now, and what do you do, and just a little bit about yourself to everyone here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, now I'm living in Berlin, so I'm Ukrainian in Berlin, but before I was living in Kyiv for 8 years. So I moved to Kyiv exactly in the moment of Revolution of Dignity, and lived there all these dramatic events in Ukraine. And since studying at the university, in Institute of International Relations, I studied international communications. So public diplomacy was my dream in my professional life for a long time. And when the Ukrainian Institute was established, it's a public institute. Some boring elements of my life, but it wouldn't be so boring, I guess, later. So Ukrainian Institute was established in 2016, so not for long ago, and it's the same institution as Goethe Institute in Germany, as British Council. But sure, Ukraine has quite different cultural, historical context. So we have another tasks to how to present Ukraine abroad. So I worked in the Ukrainian Institute before, and was doing also the project Ukraine UA. This project was also affiliated with the Foreign Ministry of Affairs, and it was like the digital platform for foreigners to know more about Ukraine through the lenses of Ukrainians, through the internal context. And I need to say that it's somehow ironical, because we created this platform to create positive associations with Ukraine, to create positive narratives, to combat all these negative associations with war, with crisis, with corruption that are dominant in the Western media for so long time. But when the war started, it turned out that these platforms is really needed now, because by this moment we knew how we can communicate with foreign audiences, but at the same time this project, these platforms grew with the audience like dramatically from, for example, in Instagram, 100,000 people to it's almost 1 million now. I just want to say how dramatically the demand for the information about Ukraine abroad grew for this moment. So my work is for a long time concerned with how Ukraine is perceived abroad.
And as a Ukrainian, I mean, I would love to talk about your work more, and this is exactly what we'll be doing, because I also such a fan of what you're doing personally on social media and calling out people for outdated myths and perceptions of Ukraine. But as a Ukrainian, I mean, as someone who is part of civil society and who has been working hard before the genocide to kind of address all the myths and misconceptions about Ukraine. After 77 days of this genocide, is it? Do you think it's still quite frustrating that we basically are forced to explain the same things over and over again that we've been explaining since, I don't know, as long as I can remember myself?
From one side, I'm really fed up with explaining, for example, why we need to write Kyiv, not Kiev, and it seems to be so small detail, but we always need to explain why it's important. But from the other side, I didn't expect that it will change fast. Again, I worked with this topic for a long time, and that's what I also want to talk about this today. That's not new. We already had the same stereotypes. The stereotypes are so deeply entrenched in the consciousness of people abroad. They didn't have any alternative sources of news other than Western media and strong Russian propaganda media as well. So I see here my professional challenge rather.
Yeah, well, it's also personal. I mean, it's hard not to
Yeah.
take it personally, for sure. I know that the work on dismantling and decolonizing perceptions of Ukraine it will probably take years and years and years. But a lot of folks are saying that we've also achieved tremendous progress in the last 77 days. If you think so as well, where would you point out to see any kind of progress, if any, if you see any?
What is the progress? That there is a great demand and attention to Ukraine, because if before we needed a lot of efforts to get an article in New York Times, for example, in Washington Post, now it's more easy. There are some obstacles yet, and I fully understand this, but what I feel personally is that people are ready to listen to you when you say that you are Ukrainian. So from some point of view, you feel abroad like a spotlight. And if you say that you're from Ukraine, people are ready to ask questions, to go deeper, to know more about Ukraine. They want somehow to use you to get more context. Speaking about the topic of colonization, I can tell my own example.
Please do.
Please.
Yeah,
It's our favorite topic, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's horrible because 1 month before the invasion, I did a lecture and the seminar in the university. We had a seminar on cultural appropriation, and I proposed that I can explain this topic through the Ukrainian view, because all the text that we read as a homework was about African appropriation. And professor who did the topic of appropriation and colonialism for a long time, she was surprised, and she couldn't get it how Ukraine and Russia can be considered in this topic. And I did this lecture. Something was more clear for the moment, but just after this historical lecture of Putin in the eve of the invasion, this professor wrote me an email and said that, oh my God, I just got what your point of view was, what you're trying to say us about how Ukraine can be considered in this Russian colonialism system. So
Oh my
I guess
God.
that
amazing.
I said, I think we did a great step with this, but still there should be new programs established in the Western universities. More Ukrainians should go to the universities abroad, so they can promote this point of view, because we can talk about this on Twitter and it has great influence, but at the same time in academia, there are so many talks that people just cannot understand how to put Ukraine in this academical context, in these topics that are studying for a long time, but Ukraine like a blind spot on this.
Yeah, and I cannot I come back to this over and over again, but I cannot recommend more the lecture that Olesya Hromeychuk did from the Ukrainian Institute in London on exactly this blind spot in academia and how Ukrainian scholars and academics for decades were discouraged to research their own country and were told that this is not a serious topic, and how it basically led to this intellectual blind spot. And yeah, this is a fantastic story, Nata. Thank you so much. But my kind of takeaway from it all, that as I was listening, I wish that happened before, and I wish it wouldn't take a genocide for people to finally see what we were trying to say for decades.
And maybe people could have, maybe we could have prevented some of the things that have happened as well if people woke up a little bit earlier to things we've been saying. Well, you have been saying, both Maksym, Nata, and a lot of Ukrainians. So it just seems like a missed opportunity for many of us, and that I hope it will change. But I also really enjoy asking this question to our guests. I follow you on Twitter, and I think some of the sort of educational stuff that you do has been super useful for me personally. I'm sure to other people as well. So I wanted to ask you, Nata, if it's possible, what has been sort of, because I think it shows a lot about our audiences that we're talking to as well. What has been the most popular post that you've done on Twitter that got the most attention, on that riled the most people up? Because I think that can give us a good insight into what people want to know more.
I think the most popular post was about deportations, and it just I started actively posting on Twitter with 400 followers, and there were no popular posts. And with this post, it's like my audience really grow. It was a moment when people in the West just started talking that the deportation in Ukraine, deportation to Russia of Ukrainians, just happening now, because before the most of media coverage in the West was about evacuation of Ukrainians to Russia. So it also shows the problem that who are the first to speak about this war? If it's Russian narratives, if it's Russian speakers who take the time to give an interviews on the West, they will name it evacuation, and media will follow this and will name it as it is in this narrative. But I posted this, and people were shocked that such things can happen in Ukraine, in Europe now, and that my key message with this tweet was that that I can't believe that such horrifying things that we all learned in the historical books, they are happening now in our lifetime, and that's why we cannot surrender to Russia. We cannot give up and just let our country be occupied, and our people let go to Russia and work in the labor camps. And I guess it was one of the most popular posts on my Twitter, yes. And then there were several tweets, and there were some shit posts about how Ukraine, how the war is presented by the speakers from Russia, or also from Western audiences. And there was a tweet about event. It was organized by the German media, and there was about 24 speakers and nobody from Ukraine. There were some, I guess, 5 or 4 people who had origins from Russia, and they named themselves like post-Sowjetische Migranten, post-Soviet migrants, and also Russland Deutsche, yeah. And the organizers of this post just tweeted, tagged these people and said that that's Ukrainian. And I asked them, how about Ukrainian in your panel? Because in these people have no background in Ukraine, no professional. They don't speak Russian. They don't speak Ukrainian. They don't follow Ukrainian media. And I asked them later, these people, do you follow Ukrainian media? What do you read about Ukraine to speak about Ukraine on this international panels? And no answer was on this. Yeah, and it was one of my most popular tweets.
It kind of leads me to my question that I really wanted to ask and point out that you work out Berlin and you're in Germany, and we can talk about myths and misconceptions that English-speaking people have, in the United States or elsewhere, but it does not even come close to the shit that we have to deal when it comes to Germany. And I know that, and we, talked with you also privately and shared our frustrations because we see it every day, and the amount of ignorance, but also sheer denial of the right to manifest your Ukrainian identity in Germany is really discouraging. And that's what I wanted to ask you. How, you're so energetic all the time calling people out, but as a Ukrainian living in Germany, surrounded by all this toxic narratives that Ukrainians just do not deserve, especially from mainstream intellectual circles, that Ukrainians are do not deserve solidarity, or Ukrainians are too uncomfortable or too provocative. How do you deal with that? Just like as a Ukrainian, as a human being, because for me, sometimes it's so overwhelming. I don't even want to go to Berlin anymore.
Yeah, I remember the chat between us. Yeah, sometimes I feel like between two fires, between Germany and Russia, and sometimes I just want to take ticket, or I don't know, several tickets to get home in Kiev and forget everything here. But the problem is that it's not like what happening in Germany on the streets, because on the streets people are walking in the park, they're enjoying life, they're enjoying sun and so on. And that's also another topic that I probably wanted to talk about these clashes of two different realities, because you live in the war reality, and people just enjoy. And that's why I was forced to give up one of my courses this semester, because before the invasion I chose a course about how to create spaces for hanging out. It was really interesting. The professor is really nice, but sorry, but during the first seminar in this semester, I was just sitting, listening to people how they hang out and how they spend the break between semester, and I couldn't understand how I can listen to this, because it was like quite different. Like people didn't see this war at all. So now I try to be in the surroundings where people can speak about war. Especially in Germany, it's a special situation because for a long time, for 3 weeks, I thought that my fellows in the university, they just they don't care, they don't want to support, they don't see the point to support. But after 3 weeks, several people started writing messages for me with support. It was long messages, and I understood that they just couldn't find right words to approach you. And now I see the same situation, that people are ready to talk to you, people are ready to support you when you start this conversation, when you show that you are open to talk about this. That's why at the university, I always open to start the communication. Any topic can be raised in the context of war. So I try to be this disruptor in the German society, at least in my surroundings, who start talking about this, and to show that what is happening now, please don't forget about this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
and
it's so important as well. And I think probably if any of your friends are here, any of my friends are here, or Maxim's, to just say that like we want to talk about the war and about Ukraine, pretty much most of the time, if not, on a completely, daily basis. I think that's why we've created relationships with each other online as well, because so many of us who have never met before in real life, because we are providing that sort of emotional support in the sense of talking about our home with each other. So I think that's just so important to remind people that like many of us do want to talk about it, and skirting around the issue is probably not the best idea moving forward with a lot of Ukrainians. And the other thing is like, obviously, I think it's also just okay to accept that all of these reactions and feelings are okay, right? Like that it's totally okay to want to not do certain things and do other things. And I think the one of the things that a lot of Ukrainians have been struggling with, and I have personally been struggling with, is a lot of people, as you say, like who you have, who are in your immediate surroundings, sometimes talk about like maybe it's time to go back to normal, which is extremely probably unhelpful right now for many of us. But I think, as you said, like initiating and being that disruptor is so important, because it will allow you and us to create a new way of living, not going back to something we had before, but create like a new way of how we want to operate given the circumstances that we're in. So thank you so much for sharing that.
absolutely, and it follows a long tradition of Ukrainians being badass and making people uncomfortable by just manifesting their lives, which is on one hand is sad, but on the other hand, this is where a lot of Ukrainians I know shine these days by speaking up and by confronting people and by making sure that the people acknowledge not only the tragedy catastrophe that our land is going through, but our existence as well. And Nada, I wanted to really ask you this question because I know I definitely know you have a very cool and smart take on that. But living in Germany, facing this need to manifest your Ukrainian identity, despite that it is considered uncomfortable. Why do you think we're even in a position where, in some places like Germany or France, or elsewhere, our existence is so uncomfortable for some of the people? They would rather, try to censor us or try to ban our flags or other nonsense that is happening more and more often.
I don't think that they are uncomfortable to speak about this. I would rather say that people live their own lives, and they don't need to care about anything that could happen. Speaking about Germany and its relationship with Russia, sometimes it seems that these countries, the people from these countries, were living in the harmony for the long time, and now the independent Ukraine appeared in the space, and it disrupted just a normal order of things. So and people need to change their routine, need to find new words to talk about this. So probably it's not about uncomfortable, but I'm not sure. I'm still searching for the answer of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted also to add to Valeria that in this time, I feel that I'm more brave to talk about myself, to talk about Ukraine, because before the invasion, it always felt that probably without your comment, people can live on, and they shouldn't be interested in what you say. But now you say now I feel that we live through the really unique experience that we can share with other people, and it should be interesting to study all this topic in the university, to talk about this with ordinary people, just to broaden our horizons and to learn new things in what is happening in this world.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I was thinking about yesterday with a friend of mine is I think, it's already happening, but it's also gonna happen even more so when this is over, is that we will go through a moral reckoning sort of thing where, you know, everything will be pretty black and white. Some people are like, you have to be on the right side of morality in whatever is happening, which is why it's so important for us Ukrainians to speak out and explain our stories and perspectives, because we need to essentially, I know that it's not our responsibility, but we need to share as much as we can so that people can make that choice about which side of our morality and history to be on. But sort of in relation to this, I guess, uh, there was a whole uprising of a lot of us Ukrainian creators, voices, whatever you want to call us, volunteer uh, and sort of ad hoc creators on social media, when you had a bit of an interaction with I don't even know if it's worth mentioning people's names, but anyway, a bit of an interaction about the way that some Russian sort of anti-war, I guess, people have been dealing with the topic of Ukraine, and I think it's just perhaps important to note that this is exactly why we're here with everyone and trying to uplift Ukrainian voices like yours. But I was just wondering if there was anything on that topic that you wanted to make our audiences know or understand, or sort of anything that's been particularly annoying you in the way that
Frustrating.
we've been supported in brackets in quote marks.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about the tweet about Schulman's interview. Yeah, am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for a quick context, Nata published a tweet where she criticized the interview of one of a prominent Russian intellectual leaders, probably I could say that, of Russian opposition. And, I totally agree the interview was insensitive, and where the person would talk about war in Ukraine without even questioning the illegal status of it in a very insensitive way, right? And when Nada pointed out, she got unleashed the whole kind of a wave of insults and abuse from a lot of Russians, including some prominent Russians, basically telling her to shut up and censor herself just because she dared to criticize one of the prominent opposition figures in Russia for insensitive Ukraine remarks. Did I get it right?
Yeah, sure. I can explain more. I need to divide this tweet and this topic into two directions. The first one is about the tweet about this interview. What I was angry about, that Schulman, as a professor, she was telling about, like she said, logic of Kremlin and logic of Russian society. But the problem is that she didn't give any broader context to this topic. And just one example, when she was talking about Crimea, about occupied territories, she said like, oh, why we need to care about it? These territories are already ours, and any person who will come after Putin, even it would be anti-Putin, these people will not be willing to return these territories to Ukraine. And her argument also was that there are a lot of people in Crimea now, in occupied territories, who enjoy living under Russian regime, and they don't want to go to another territories. And my argument against was that Schulman didn't provide any other context about people who don't want to live in this terror, who are tortured, who are killed, who are persecuted. And by such presentation of the topic to the media, to Deutsche Welle, but it was for Russian audience. I guess there wasn't no translation. There is no other alternatives how people can think about this war. So how can we expect from Russian society to be more revolutionary, to do something with the shitty country, sorry, if they just can't imagine that there could be other people who don't want to live like they live. And that was my the main problem. And also I can hear it from other anti-Russian liberals in interviews that they use this language of Russian regime, like official Russian propaganda, and they are even not conscious about this. They use these words because they don't know any other context and any other language that can be used to describe this. For example, this Schulman always use присоединение when we are talking about Crimea, and it's in Ukraine we call it annexation, and the perception of these two words are quite different. And I can share another story, great story from about one exhibition that should be organized in New York, in Prague, in Tbilisi, and I guess in some other cities in the world. This exhibition was called Переворот. So in Russian, it's like could be a synonym of revolution, but in Ukrainian context, it's used to describe the events in Maidan, Revolution of Dignity. And when I saw the announcement of this exhibition, I thought, I read in social media that New York Gallery can't organize the exhibition that is curated by the curator from Moscow, and there are no mention about war. But in this announcement was said that this exhibition is organized in solidarity with Ukrainians. But when I started to talk with this curator, she said that they can't use words like war because they would be sentenced for 15 years. And it turned out that the exhibition that is organized to be presented in Russia under the Russian law should be the same as in New York, in Tbilisi, and other countries. And this how this liberal propaganda, anti-Putin propaganda, can also be presented in other countries. So the same propaganda as in Russia is conveyed as messages to the democratic countries.
And I think it's a great couple of examples, because it's something that we discuss with other Ukrainians very often, privately and also publicly, and part of our frustration with this good Russians narrative, that it always breaks down and comes to this famous phrase by one of the founders of First Ukrainian Republic, Vinnychenko, and basically said that liberal or democratic Russians always stop at the Ukraine and Ukrainian independence. And I think in that context, the frustration that we all share all the time, that in conversations with liberal Russians, we never hear any acknowledgement or even attempt to acknowledge the long history of Russian colonialism that dates back centuries, and any acknowledgement that Russia as a state and as a culture bears collective responsibility for all those atrocities and genocides and invasions that were happening hundreds and hundreds of years. And maybe starting from acknowledgement is something that will allow Russia to leave it behind. But even if the most so-called liberal pro-democratic Russians just lose their shit at this mention all the time, it's just, you suddenly get a face barrage of insults, and they call you names for even like mentioning it. I think that Russia has such a bigger problem than Putin, and definitely what is happening in Ukraine won't end with Putin if Russians do not start talking about it.
Yeah. And just to add quickly, because I want to ask Nata as well this, I actually was with a friend from Germany yesterday, and she said something super interesting that, you know, we all learned at some point in our schools and so on and so forth, but it's interesting to think about it in this context, is that a lot of Germans, you know, since childhood, since, you know, for a very long time, have been taught to accept the collective sort of responsibility for a lot of the things that happened during World War II. That's like, she was saying, that's like sort of almost in their, you know, DNA. That's what history books are all geared towards, that acceptance, that understanding, and that sort of acknowledgement. And she said that like she feels, and I feel similarly, that I think a lot of Russians who try to right now separate themselves, I'm not saying that everyone should, you know, I just think the super active, like, I'm moving away from Russia and everything that's Russian, but I'm not going to mention imperialism or colonialism, and I'm going to super distance myself from everything, is just something that I think potentially they need to look at again, and just consider how, you know, Russian imperial history and so on and so forth has had an impact on where we are today, and just think about that collective responsibility that a lot of people have. But Nata, I don't know if because obviously you are in Germany, and obviously we are discussing. You know, we did say in the beginning, very beginning, first few episodes of this podcast, that we don't always compare situations and things in history and different places. But I was just wondering, have you had similar conversations with Germans? You're obviously in Berlin. Has anyone shared any similar sort of advice / experience of obviously a country and people that have gone through a big reckoning and a big acknowledgement of history?
Yeah, I also talked with my friend who is actually Ukrainian, but she lived in Germany since 5 years old. So school, she was attending school here in Germany, and she also say that I can't understand how it works, because I'm Ukrainian, but I feel guilty for Ukrainians for the World War II. So the school program was so intense that people really feel this guilt. But for me, I noticed it from the very beginning of the invasion, that because of this feeling of guilty, people can't do anything, because they are so ashamed that they are just afraid to start talking about this. And I guess that's the problem, why people couldn't find word to approach Ukrainians to start talking, because it always was easy to distance from the problem and not start talking about this. So I guess that somehow a problem, how with the consequences of this Erinnerungskultur, culture of remembrance in Germany, because we expected that people who lived through such a history, they would be more active in protecting us, in supporting us, but it turned out that they just don't want to do anything about war and to have anything about war. And probably you followed, I also tweeted this, one of the signatories of this anti-delivery weapon in Germany, Letta Scholz. He discussed on the television, and he taught our ambassador Melnik about that we Germans, we know what is war exactly about, and we don't want to repeat it. So they consider it from the perspective, not the victim, but the country who invaded in World War II. So that's quite different perspective of us as the victims of war, and they, the country who invaded.
Yeah, it was, oh God, it was one of the probably most disgusting things I've ever seen on German television. Imagine this, privileged white German person lecturing an ambassador of a country that is going through genocide, and also a country that lost 8 million people during the World War II. What is appropriate and what is not appropriate in terms of reaction to such catastrophic events? God, I'm still thinking about it and remembering, and I feel utterly disgusted by it. But uh, I wanted to ask you kind of a quick question. This is something that is helpful all the time, but to a lot of Ukrainians that are listening to us, because they're trying to also figure out the best way to communicate and get to other people and recruit solidarity, but also for a lot of journalists that listen to us all the time, and Western journalists that are trying to do a better job at covering Ukraine. So, in your personal experience of conveying messages and breaking myths about Ukraine, what are maybe one or two the most effective ways of doing that you figure out for yourself in the last 77 days, if any?
It's a complex question, to be honest. I think the biggest problem in communicating in Germany is language, because it's not so hard to find Ukrainians who can speak English and who can make an interview with German journalists, or sorry, any other journalist. But in Germany, it's really important to speak in their language, because it can just save efforts and time. And to be honest, not all German and even German journalists can speak easily in English. So I think the biggest problem is covering truth about Ukraine to other countries that are not English speaking primarily. It's like language is the basic problem. That's why it's so important. So as much as possible, Ukrainians go to the universities abroad to learn languages, to know better this internal context, these local problems, and how they can embed our narrative in the local questions. Because I remember when the invasion started, before the invasion started, the most dominant narrative about this was that the prices for gas and for any other products will be rising, and it was so disgusting to hear all this news. But I think we need to follow the local agenda to know how we can put our messages within the local context.
Absolutely. And part of the reasons, we would love to do, and maybe we'll be lucky in Ukrainian spaces, we'll get enough resources to do various language versions. But like part of my personal journey was just to learn the right vocabulary first, so I can convey my thoughts properly in foreign language, because so many people, especially English speaking people, German speaking, they don't understand how hard it is, even if you sound okay in foreign language, how still it's hard and a labor for you to convey your feelings and your emotions, and especially on such complicated topics like war and genocide and your identity. So hopefully this space is not only helpful for foreigners to learn something new, but also for Ukrainians to pick up something new when it comes to just words to use and concepts to explain.
Western journalists, and not only journalists, like Westerners, want to be equally distant from the two sides of the conflict, like to be objective. And because I feel that when we are speaking about Russian propaganda, and please don't listen Russian propaganda, they listen at the same time you are trying to put your own Ukrainian propaganda and persuade me why you are right. That's why this narrative is always and in the situation of trying to present equally Ukrainian and Russians, Ukrainian voices are also faded.
Probably, I hope you will back me up here, that when we have these conversations about wrong perceptions or wrong or the attitudes that we find wrong or problematic when it comes to foreigners, whether Germans or other foreigners in regards of Ukraine, this is not to say that we do not acknowledge or appreciate the unprecedented wave of solidarity and support that Ukraine also got from regular people all across the world. But I feel like we spend extra time explaining and extra time talking about it just because we know that you can be better allies, and this is something that we really want to have as maybe even an act of appreciation for all the help that we're already getting. Am I wrong here?
I totally agree with you, and I should say that in this context of that probably we seem to be not so thankful to foreigners ordinary foreigners who try to help us. I always say thank you personally to these people who help me, who help any other people, to volunteers on the Hauptbahnhof, on the train station. But I just want to say that we put so many efforts and time to combat all these narratives that just that harm Ukrainian narratives. Sorry for this. And we are at this moment we are primarily thinking about how we can win this war as soon as possible, and that's why we can criticize too much people and not pay so much attention to thank to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before we finish, because we only have a couple of minutes left, we ask this question to everyone, and we're really interested in your opinion on this as well. But we ask everyone what it means to be Ukrainian for them, all our guests that come, and whether that has changed from before the war and now, the way that you feel about being Ukrainian and what that means for you. So we'd like to ask you the same question.
It's really hard to compare to the life before, because I think nothing changed from that time. But what changed that we now need to have another job, to volunteer, to study, to spend a lot of time tweeting, sharing information about Ukraine. And I guess that every Ukrainian, probably every Ukrainian, I can speak for myself, feel that he or she should be a source of information about Ukraine, and it takes a lot of personal time also.
100%. Thank you so much for joining us. Maksym, I don't know if there's any last questions or comments you'd like to add.
No, I wanted to. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Nata, for coming and sharing all of it. And I'm sure you have so much more to share with us, and hopefully you will come back, and we'll be definitely love to have you on again. But also wanted to thank everyone who joined live broadcast and also will be listening to this in recording for our podcasts. You can find them on Spotify and Apple. For folks who want to ask questions or want to, ask questions, our featured Ukrainians, you can always do it by using hashtag Ukrainian Spaces during the broadcast or in between them. You can log your questions or maybe suggestions, what you want us to cover and who you want us to feature as featured Ukrainians, and we will try to accommodate as many as possible. Or there's another option. You can become our Patreon sponsor, And all our Patreon sponsors have front row when it comes to Q&A, and you can not only ask them by typing those questions on our Patreon page, but also by voicing them in person and join the broadcast as well as our sponsors. So this is it. Again, Nata, thank you so much. Дякую тобі супер дуже.
Thank you for having me. Дякую. Слава Україні.
Thank you.
Героям слава.